than a year before, they were earning wages better than any warehouse employee in the area. Today, they are gone. Not just from the gates of the daily warehouse, but gone forever from Cardinal Health. The story you're about to see isn't pleasant. In fact, at times what you will see and hear may seem shocking, even offensive. It is, however, a story that all Cardinal employees should know. The J.W. Daily Warehouse in Peabody, Massachusetts is a wholly owned subsidiary of Cardinal Health. In 1997, 170 employees working at that warehouse went on strike, and that strike would last 10 months. However, from day one, there were replacement workers willing to cross the union's picket lines, and together with the non-union employees who continued working, they managed to keep the warehouse operating with a minimum of disruption. This, in spite of the fact that from day one, the union decided they too would cross a line. The line separating human decency from unrestrained cruelty, harassment, and depravity.
Oh, yeah. Mother. Come on. They'd go after your mother, they'd go after your father, they'd go after your daughter. They'd destroy your car, they'd get into your house, they'd kill you in the night while you were sleeping. Just some very nasty, violent, they tried to use tactics that would intimidate you.
I was terrified. I honestly was terrified. They were very violent, very vocal. They were throwing objects at the buses. They were trying to tip them at one point.
I want to go home. That was the first thing coming in my mind. I want to go home because they coming to get you. It's not to talk. It's if you give them an opportunity, they're going to get you.
You kind of shut off what's being yelled at you. At least I did. That's kind of how I dealt with it.
Well, I think the level of it's hard to even describe how vulgar, and it went well beyond just vulgarity of individuals to the point where they would threaten to go to where they live, which they knew, and rape their wives and kill their children, and very explicit details of how they were going to rape their wives.
Even now, no one at the Daily Warehouse completely understands what pushed these union employees over the edge. But those who were there prior to the strike remember a working atmosphere that day in and day out could only be described as openly antagonistic.
I took a tote from one conveyor, picked it up, and put it on another conveyor, just helping a person, thinking I was doing the right thing, and we received a grievance for that action. And the grievance was that I, as management, was taking away union work by moving that tote.
There's been a history in the facility of tension between the distribution center, the employees, the bargaining unit, and the management.
There was this, this atmosphere to kind of gig one another. Not only did union employees try to gig management, and sometimes management try to gig union employees, but the union employees tried to get each other.
That was something that went on for years.
John Kibbe became a supervisor prior to the strike. Before becoming a supervisor, he was a member of the union for 2.5 years and served as a union steward. When he left the union, part of the reason was purely financial.
It was just pay your union dues, $7.67 a week that we paid. And my thing was, where's my dues going? I'm paying almost $8 a week, $400 times 200 employees in the warehouse. Where's my union dues going? We didn't get anything back. Anything, period.
But there were other reasons, like how the union seemed to protect only the worst of his co-workers, leaving others, like himself, to pick up the slack. That and the clear encouragement the union gave to an ongoing battle of petty disputes that kept management and employees alike on pins and needles. That atmosphere hurt the employees, the company, and worst of all, the customers.
They would watch every manager to see if they overstepped that boundary by just one iota. And then they'd go crying to the union, you know, so-and-so's doing my work.
We would have to wait for 10, 15, 30 minutes to actually call in a bargaining unit member to touch that tote, put it on the truck, while a customer who could have a patient waiting for an operation or a procedure was waiting for that medication, and it was ridiculous.
It was also a common occurrence. By 1996, the union had many employees at the Daily Warehouse convinced that they were untouchable, that the union promises of job security were true. However, in November of 1996, they began to learn that wasn't the case.
We hold a very good position here in this marketplace, but the competition continually nips at our heels. We had to make some decisions in the business to make sure that we remain competitive with what we were up against.
Specifically, in order to compete, the company decided to begin subcontracting its delivery routes to outside trucking companies in the middle of the union contract. The union fought against the move and lost. As a result, approximately 60 union truck drivers at Daily found themselves out of work. And while the Daily truck drivers did receive a negotiated severance package, for many it was perhaps the first sign that the union didn't have the power it claimed. This setback in union prestige also created a strong need for local union officials to prove themselves.
I think it was a power issue. I think the leadership in the union felt that because of the way the driver situation went down, they did not look good in that situation, so they needed to reestablish some level of strength.
And with negotiations for the next contract coming up in just a few months, apparently the union saw what they believed to be the perfect opportunity to do just that.
The things that the employees, that the union was asking for were just unbelievable. Out of this world pay increases, out of this world funding of their pension.
The demands that the union was placing on the company were irrational, unsubstantiated issues where they wanted Super Bowl Sunday off if the New England Patriots was in the Super Bowl. Basically, they wanted to make the decisions for the company as to how we were to run the business.
Usually, I would say the last 3 or 4 times, the company probably gave in to avoid a strike, you know, but eventually, you know, it hurt the company and they just couldn't do it anymore financially. You know, it got to the point where we just can't give anymore, and, you know, and that's it.
True enough. With the current contract set to expire on Sunday, April 6th of 1997, negotiations were at a deadlock. Company negotiators had already made their best and final offer. The next move belonged to the union.
Everybody there had the right to vote. And they just stood in line and they cast, quote unquote, a secret ballot. And they were read while we were there. And after they read them, they said, we will strike at midnight if they don't meet our demands.
The union didn't want to negotiate anymore. It was either to give us what we want or we're going on strike. And so that's what happened.
I sit here and I tell you I could not believe it. But at that point, I was literally shaking because I knew that we were as prepared as we could be for this, and that we would weather the storm, but I knew it was going to be a long haul.
And the union had, union officials were saying, they can't do it, they simply can't do it without you. Well, they did.
Throughout negotiations, company negotiators had warned union leadership that if a strike was called, the company was prepared to bring in replacement workers. And once those replacement workers entered the warehouse, they would be considered permanent employees. The union either didn't believe it or didn't care.
We learned later on that the leadership had led the union members to believe that they would not be able, that we would not be able to get one truck out of this facility, that you know, they would totally stop our operation here.
They couldn't have been more wrong.
We did have replacement workers in here right away. We did have trucking companies willing to cross the picket line and help us out with deliveries. We certainly put everything in motion to make sure that business would not be interrupted.
Simply stated, it was not the quick victory that the union members had been led to expect. But if the people walking the picket line were surprised at Cardinal's resolve to continue operating, it was nothing compared to the surprise of those who had to cross that line. Virtually overnight, the people who were on that line, people who had been co-workers, even friends, became a raging mob. You
know, facing the people, face facing the people, facing your coworkers, people in customer service that I worked with. You know, that was tough. You know, watching them with gestures, shouting obscenities, people you sat next to. You never thought they would do stuff like this, and they do.
I thought I was friends with them. I was sick about the strike. I was sick. That Monday, I felt so bad for these people. I really did. I mean, I worked with them. I saw them every day. Monday, I felt bad. Tuesday, I felt bad. And Wednesday, I felt bad. 4 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, I got a call. They told me they were going to my daughter.
Hey, fella, you better hide your face. You better hide your face real well. Shame yourself, you piece of shit. You no good mother.
Absolutely scared. I was so scared. The police pushing back the crowd throwing eggs and chocolate and smushing it around to get it all soft and spitting on the windows so the driver couldn't see, and rocks and glass and sheet metal, everything being thrown down there and then pounding on the windows. Scared. Plain English.
What I've heard from strikes before, and this was actually the first I've ever been through, is that it's pretty mellow at the beginning, and then as frustrations build and as people start missing paychecks, then the anger and the hostility comes out. We saw that from day one here, and it was really shocking.
Of course, in any strike situation, a certain amount of anger, violence, and hostility is to be expected. But in this strike, not only was the hostility there from day one, it was at a level that exceeded all reason and recognized no boundaries.
I mean, I had nothing to do with the strike. I had 2 kids going to private college. I had to work. I had no choice.
Like many at the warehouse, Phyllis Brewster was not part of the union or the bargaining unit. Neither was her daughter. But that didn't stop one of the union strike captains from singling out her daughter as an ongoing target for intimidation.
He told her, and please excuse the language, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna rape you.
At the time, her daughter was only 18 years old.
The racial slurs that came out of people's mouths, again, that I'm not going to mention her name, but this lady, she's probably in her 40s or 50s, the sweetest thing that I've ever seen. Union employee, was always actually very friendly to me. She was on days, and she was out there just screaming her head off, you know, calling people the N-word, saying terrible things about the Hispanics.
Okay, they were saying, you Spanish people took my job, stuff like that.
And these were people who 2 days earlier had worked side by side with us, had been a part of this company, and now they were telling both men and women that they were going to go and rape their children at home while they were stuck here in this building.
What made things even worse was that instead of controlling the situation, local union officers were actually adding fuel to the fire. In fact, the local president went as far as to bring in professional strikers from other union locals, and according to some, actually led some of the worst attacks on those who dared cross her picket line.
She said that you need to go out there and do whatever you have to do to make their life miserable.
The treasurer of the union actually yelled out to me that he was having intercourse with my mother while I was at work. Didn't say it in such nice terms, but it was shocking to me that, it was shocking enough that the strikers were saying this, but to have union officials yell this stuff out was mind-boggling, and it really brought the realization home that these people there was no control over these people.
All the more reason why company management had to take the threats made by the strikers very seriously. The company was committed to providing all the necessary safeguards to employees, and the safety of those employees was first in everyone's mind.
Hey, Orton, I'm going to be your wife.
He says, you know, we're going to, you know, I'm going to beat the out of you. We're going to hold you down while we screw your wife and your kids, and you know, they get real personal.
Did I send my family out of town for the first month of the strike? Yes, I did. I mean, those are things that I can speak to that How that affected me personally, did I let the organization know I did that? No. But I certainly was scared. Scared for my family more than anything else.
So we had people threatened in homes, and we actually provided police details at some employees' homes who were targeted individually by the strikers.
They threw rocks, probably about this size, and there was roughly 3 of them, through my front 3 bay windows I have in my house.
We had a number of vehicles with windows smashed. We had many flat tires. We had the union members, the strikers, were throwing out boards with nails in them, just plain nails. Even a black rubber welcome mat with nails pushed through it that they had thrown in front of the vehicles.
I remember you! Don't worry, I remember you!
Imagine that simply to come to work, you had to face verbal abuse and constant threats of violence to yourself, your home, and to your family. Now imagine that level of intimidation going on for almost 10 months. Because for the better part of the strike, that's exactly what the people working at the daily warehouse had to live with every day. And after a while, it was enough to get under even the thickest of skins.
So I was sitting there looking through the windshield at this ugly striker outside, yelling at me. Police came down, got him away from the bus. We backed up. We ended up coming through the top driveway. On the way out, a lot of the people said, hey, Jim, good job. You stood your ground, just looked him in the eye and just didn't do anything about it. He didn't rattle you. I said, well, hey, I try. You guys are got to get in, so I got to do it. After I parked the bus, I went in an office and just sat down and stopped shaking.
And for them to expect that by acting that way, that was going to earn them the right to come back into this facility, to me, was a very wrong approach. But that was the approach that the union chose.
And ultimately, it was an approach that failed, and failed miserably. Soon after the strike began, Cardinal Health filed both federal and National Labor Relations Board charges against the union local, citing the destruction of property and the unrelenting use of threats and verbal harassment. The NLRB ruled in Cardinal's favor and issued a 24-page complaint against the union. Cardinal also formally terminated many of the union employees who were the worst offenders on the picket line. The union filed charges against the company, charges that were dismissed by the NLRB. The NLRB then approved the use of permanent replacements because the strike was over economic issues. In the fall of 1997, hope for the strikers was disappearing. The strikers could not bump the replacement workers, and there were no jobs available when those strikers wanted to go back to work. And while Massachusetts is one of the few states that provides unemployment benefits during a strike, by this time those benefits had run out. With Christmas approaching, the noise of the picket line faded to a dull roar. A few months later, February 14, 1998, after an exchange of legal accusations and rulings with the National Labor Relations Board, it was over. Today, things are very different at the Daily Warehouse. All union employees have resigned from their jobs. The vast majority of the striking employees accepted some severance pay and moved on. A few went on a list at a temporary employment agency. Today, there are no union employees at Cardinal's Boston facility.
We weren't about to throw away all these employees who came in through hard times after, resolving something with the union. I mean, these people, from day one working for this company, went through a lot. And once we hired people, I think it was important for those replacement workers to know that they weren't just temporary fill-ins, that they had a job now.
And by all accounts, they're doing a very good job at that. In fact, even before the strike was over, the Daily Warehouse began to experience something of a turnaround.
On average, we would get customer calls pre-strike. I would personally take 20 to 30 calls a day on customer complaints, issues. Today, I don't take any calls on complaints and issues, which to me is remarkable. We have people who care.
Our financial results are the best that they've ever been in years. Our productivity results, our accuracy, everything that we do, every single indicator that we measure is dramatically improved in the last 12 months.
I think it's a lot more relaxed today. far more relaxed.
It's a whole different atmosphere. I mean, the people are friendly, they smile, they say hello.
The money that I had put into the union for so many years, had that money gone into a 401, I would probably have half again or double what I'm getting out of the pension from the union. You know, so at this point in my life, that's a lot of money.
I'm coming up on 41 years old, and I've told people before that this is one of the first jobs, this is the first job that I've had that I could see myself retiring from.
But you feel close to people because you went through this thing together. That's a good feeling.
However, in spite of all the good that has come about after the strike, you won't find anyone here who would call it a victory. Instead, they remember it as a stern warning of just how ugly a strike can become and how it can change people and change lives.
A lot of our employees in here said that if they come back, if they ever come back, we'll leave because we can no longer work with them because they crossed that line.
We wanted you to hear this story because it's important. Important for you to know the reality of a strike and all the risks that come with it. In your career at Cardinal, you may face issues that are important to you, your company, and your family. You may have to decide which side of the line you are on. Seeing our people face a choice of crossing a union picket line or walking it is something no one at Cardinal Health ever wants to experience again. And perhaps if we remember the lessons we learned at Daly, we never will.
Having been there, if people think that a union is going to save their job or make it better, they're very sadly mistaken, because tons of people lost their job thinking just that.